How's it going, everybody? It is Wednesday, April 23rd. I'm Henry Sklar here with Tony Tsoukalas, as always, and you are watching or listening to Tide Pod. Tony, happy belated Easter. I know you had a big weekend with your Celtics playing, and now you have the Patriots drafting, but how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm a little bit better than Jason Tatum's wrist right now, so that's good. Little worried about that. Speaking of my Celtics, but no, it was a good Easter. It's a good time to be a Boston sports fan, but it's also a good time to be an Alabama sports fan as well because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, we finally made it to NFL draft week. I mean, it's crazy that we were in Mobile 2.5 months ago for the Senior Bowl, seeing those guys like Jaylen Milroe for the last time in their Alabama helmets. And now we're going to find out where they're going to be playing for the next couple of years in the NFL. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about the NFL draft to begin, maybe some of the outlook on where some Alabama prospects may end up and, where they're currently projected to land in some mock drafts. And then we're going to talk about both the spring football window and then the basketball window, which officially closed. So without further ado, let's get into it. Tony, you published a great article this week going over a bunch of mock drafts about some of the prospects. If you would pick maybe one or two of your favorite fits for some of those guys, not named Jaylen Milroe, where would you say?
Yeah, one of the common projections I had was Jahad Campbell at number 19 to the Tampa Bay Bucks. I just think that fits for a lot of reasons. I think there's a reason sometimes, these experts sometimes they get them right. And, you look at the Bucks are a team that needs a kind of a linebacker at that spot. He's probably going to be the best person on the board or one of the best people on the board at pick number 19. So I like him there. As terms of fits, one thing I mentioned in my mock draft, I actually these mock drafts saw Tyler Booker slip a little bit. I think we were seeing him a little bit earlier on, maybe a month or so ago, a little bit higher, maybe a guaranteed first round pick. I like Tyler Booker. I like him as a plug and play guard. I think he can play right away. I do think that he's going to be hurt, and this is where we're seeing him slide a little bit in the recent mock drafts. There's a lot of tackles in this draft that aren't really tackles. They're going to move over to guard. So it creates this overcrowding at the guard position because you got guys like, Kelvin Banks. Is Kelvin Banks really going to be a tackle, the Texas tackle? Is he going to stay at tackle or is he going to move to guard? There's a few people like that. So I think that kind of hurts Tyler Booker a little bit, but I actually like him, and none of the mock drafts had it. I was a little bit disappointed. I like him at I think it's 25 to the Houston Texans. If they pick at 25, I think that's the way they pick. I like him there, and you think a D'Amico Ryans, the Texans need some offensive line help. You got an Alabama guy who in an organization that likes to take Alabama guys in Houston. I could see Tyler Booker ending up there. Wouldn't mind him slipping all the way down to my Patriots and having them maybe double dip at the offensive line because I know that they need it. But I like him there. And then, I think that's really, Henry, going to be the only two Alabama names we hear on day one. I know Jaylen Milroe is going to the draft. I just look, crazy things happen, and we're probably going to go into this, but I just don't see Jaylen Milroe getting picked in the first round. I know that sometimes quarterbacks get picked high, and he's a guy that's very polarizing, but I just don't know if I see it there, if he's done enough to kind of get a team to overshoot that much and draft him in the first round.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into Milroe some more in a few minutes here, but back to what you said about Jahad Campbell, I would really love to see him with the Bucks. I mean, first of all, he obviously has some experience playing in Raymond James Stadium after Alabama played in the ReliaQuest Bowl down in Tampa in December. And
he hasn't had any good experience there. Though. He's got that game in the rain and then the ReliaQuest Bowl. It's probably not his favorite place, right?
Yeah. But when I think of the Bucks, he just seems like the perfect fit. Jahad Campbell is kind of that prototypical NFL middle linebacker prospect. He can get sideline to sideline. He's really athletic. He can cover and he can defend in the run game. And when you think about the Bucks, they've had a lot of great linebackers, and Levante David getting up there in age, obviously. You kind of want to bring in that next crop of guys, and Jahad Campbell would be perfect for them. But I know ESPN had their mock, and they had him slipping all the way to 32, coming to my Eagles, which would be – I would absolutely love that. That'd be so much fun. I would order that jersey on draft night. The Eagles don't really value linebacker too much, so I don't even know if we'd pick him, but Jahad Campbell, if he was on the board at 32 and I'm the Eagles GM, Howie Roseman, I'm sprinting his name to the podium. And then Tyler Booker, just go ahead.
The Eagles, isn't the thing is they only take Alabama players on the other side of the ball. If Jahad Campbell was a defensive player, he might go there. Maybe they'll get Michael Williams or something. they only seem to take Georgia players on defense and Alabama players on offense.
Yeah, and it would be interesting because the Eagles, we did just extend Zach Bond on a big 3-year deal, and we have Nakobe Dean from Georgia coming back from injury, obviously. So I don't really know where Campbell would slot in. Maybe we'd use him more off the edge, but I would be so excited if we were able to snag him on Thursday night at 32.
I think if you're getting Campbell at 32, Henry, you're doing it based off of he's clearly the best player on the board. And I think you just kind of throw needs away and just say, like, this guy, especially with a guy that's as versatile as him too, because he can be an off-ball linebacker or he can be an edge. And so he's kind of gives that versatility to whoever drafts him for sure.
Yeah, he would be so much fun to watch in a Fangio scheme. I can't lie. And then Tyler Booker, I really like his fit at 28 with the Lions. I think that would be super fun. Tyler Booker, the one thing everybody talks about him, which is not like doesn't come from his playing, is his personality. He has a huge personality. He's a great culture guy and he'll be not only a plug and play offensive guard, but he'll be a perfect guy to plug into any NFL locker room. And the Lions, I mean, you can tell based off their last season, they were the 1 seed in the NFC. They did lose to the Commanders, but they had one of their best seasons in franchise history, and they're building obviously a great culture there with Dan Campbell at head coach. And I feel like Tyler Booker would just be another guy in that locker room who would add to that culture and hopefully get the Lions over the hump, which they're obviously looking to do. Tony, you have any thoughts on that?
Would he'd add to a growing list of Alabama Lions too?
Yeah,
you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, who apparently the Lions might be entertaining trading Jamison Williams, and that's another thing we'll have to watch on draft day is which Alabama players maybe get traded away. I think Williams is the only name that I've really heard in that regard of former Alabama players that could get traded, but that's something to watch. That
would definitely be interesting. I mean, he had such an electric year last season, but they do have to pay him coming up. So I would kind of understand where they're coming from.
Laporta, they got to pay.
Yeah, they have a lot of contracts.
So it just kind of happens that way where if you have a number one receiver or somebody that another team could view as a number one receiver, sometimes, you're not going to be able to keep a guy like that. And so maybe they'll trade him. Be interesting to see where JMO ends up if that's the case. Because I think he's got number one receiver tendencies, qualities. So that'd be interesting. But I like the fit of Tyler Booker there as well.
And they're already their offensive line is, stacked. They have a lot of top players in that group. So Booker would be able to definitely learn from a lot of those.
Get him a Super Bowl after he finished so close with Alabama a couple of years ago.
There's
a Super Bowl.
There's definitely going to be a lot to watch. And then, Tony, if there's a guy not named Jaylen Milroe, like I said before, that you think kind of the NFL consensus is sleeping on, who you think might have a better NFL career than most people think right now, who would you say that would be?
From an Alabama perspective, it's really tough because it kind of slips off. After those three, to a certain extent, I think that, if we're talking about Jahad Campbell slipping all the way down to 32, I think we're probably sleeping on him. He's a guy we're not too removed from him just blowing up the combine. And I think that that's, what he offers. So I would say that I think that there's a lot of guys that you could take a chance on. I don't necessarily think you would say that they're sleeping on because they're all going to be day 3 guys after Milroe. But somebody like CJ Dupree, I think CJ Dupree could have had such a better season at Alabama under different such a better career 2 years at Alabama under different circumstances. It just didn't really fit with the offense. Jaylen Milroe had his struggles as a passer, and I think that CJ Dupree is a guy that I think has more talent. I don't think he's going to blow anyone away, and I'm not saying the NFL better take watch, but he's a guy that might not get drafted that I think should get drafted. So somebody like that. I know it's not a really sexy answer right there, but I kind of like him as a prospect that really maybe he'll just occasionally get thrown in as a 6th or 7th rounder. But I like him. I think he's got a chance to be a backup tight end in the league, which is once again not the flashiest statement, but I think he's a solid guy.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where Malachi Moore ends up. I mean, he obviously, it's not often you see a player play 5 years out of school and contribute in all of those seasons. Malachi is obviously a fan favorite among Alabama fans. And kind of like Tyler Booker, I feel like he's one of those guys that you can put in a locker room and he's going to be a good addition. Malachi did have more blips than Booker, I'd say. Obviously the Vanderbilt game was frustrating and other stuff like that. But I feel like he's a guy that I would be definitely excited to add if I can get him in the 5th or 6th round even. And I mean, he brings versatility to the safety position. He's a hard hitter. He's solid in coverage. He's versatile. He pretty much does everything at a solid rate. So I'm super excited to see where he ends up. And I think if you get him on a contending team and he can play early a little bit at the end of games, that'd be super fun for him.
Yeah, I think Malachi, I mean, look, he's undersized and he's not going to necessarily blow you away physically, but he's solid in a lot of aspects. I think you could put him at all three safety positions, and that's going to be valuable. When you're looking at some of these guys, not to take anything away from Malachi, maybe he goes past the ceiling that I'm giving him right now, but I think you're looking at a backup player. And so as a backup player, though, you got a guy like Malachi Moore, has a little bit of a nose for the football, can play on special teams. He can be, if he can be a special teams hero that you can plug in at 3 different positions. If somebody gets hurt, you got kind of a jack of all trades that, is a smart, instinctual player, going to learn whatever defense he's in pretty well. And then you got a guy that, can be just a fill-in guy if somebody goes down. I like that for him. And then, I think he could be a big contributor on special teams. And you couple that with the leadership aspect, I think that makes him a valuable spot. And so that maybe makes him somebody you probably take in the 5th round, or maybe even the 4th round if you think he can contribute a little bit more than what I'm saying. But he's definitely a day 3 guy. I don't think he's going to slip into day 2, but I think that versatility, with him, it's just he offers you so much. Maybe his ceiling is not as high as, I don't know, maybe you look at a Tim Smith, right? The defensive line. I think you could argue that he has a high ceiling, just hasn't produced. With Malachi, I think you have a really high floor. And you pretty much know you're at least going to get something from him. And then you're also going to get that leadership aspect. And so I like that from him. And I think, as much as teams just want to knock it out of the park with, you can't just always take a chance on these people that could be hit or miss guys. I think getting a dependable defensive back like Malachi Moore, who can, come in, be a backup, come in, play special teams, you're not going to have to worry about him. I think that's going to be enticing for several NFL teams.
Yeah, of course, this is a little bit of a weaker Alabama class going into the NFL than we've seen in years past. But Alabama does have a quarterback going to the draft this year. They do have a quarterback that will actually be at the draft this year, Jaylen Milroe. Milroe's name has been thrown out in a lot of different reports, and we're 2 days from the draft recording this, and I don't think me or Tony have any sort of clue where Milroe can end up, but we do have some sort of an idea on teams that would be a nice fit for him. So, Tony, I guess we can go back and forth on this one, but where would you like to see Milroe end up, and where do you think he'll get picked in the draft?
I think ideally, there was those rumors about Pittsburgh. I think that if we're just going off of fit, I think that that's not a bad one. I think they have a team. I think that can be suited for him. They've traded and now they've got some receivers for him. I like what they have going there, and I don't think that he'd be required to come in right away. Obviously Tomlin too is just a well-established coach. He gets to learn from he's got some stability there. He's a guy, if you look at, Jaylen's had to bounce around from coach to coach now. I think having someone that's just one of the NFL's best coaches, that could be an enticing thing for him. But I don't see him necessarily going there. I don't think he's going to be a 1st round pick. Like I said, I think what's going to happen with Jaylen is, first of all, I think Shedeur Sanders is probably going to slide a little bit. I don't think he's going to go number 3 to the Giants or anything really close to that. I could see Shedeur maybe sliding down to a Pittsburgh or Seattle, and then Jaylen sliding down to the 2nd round. And I think what's going to happen is one of those teams that passed up on Shedeur after the Titans take Cam Ward at number 1, whether it's the Browns, whether it's the Giants, I think they're going to probably, after they get their guy in the top 5, whatever they pick, I think then they're going to circle back and be like, you know what, we're going to take a chance with Jaylen Milroe and possibly get a 1st round talent in the 2nd round. You look at it, the Browns pick 33. Milroe might be the first person off the board in the second round. And, you've got the Giants at 34, I think could make sense. I think you could look at you've got the Raiders at 37 and the Jets at 42. So one of those teams, I think, is probably, with those second picks, I think that's probably where Jaylen's gonna go.
Yeah, the Steelers are a very interesting fit, obviously. I mean, Mike Tomlin's a guy who frequently is at Alabama's pro day. He's pretty well connected within Alabama's program, and he's always around. But I think the issue with the fit in Pittsburgh would be that I actually do think Milroe might have to come in and play pretty early, because the Steelers are kind of handicapped at quarterback right now. They don't know who's going to be their quarterback going into next season at this point. Obviously, they've been awaiting the decision from former Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who nobody knows what's going on with. I don't even think he knows what he wants to do next year during the season. But I think that would be maybe a little better of a fit for Jaylen if they do bring in Aaron Rodgers and he's not forced to play right away. But I think obviously the ideal scenario for a quarterback like Milroe, who is going to be more of a project, a guy that you don't really want to play day one, you kind of want to let him wait in the wings, and you want to see if he has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. That would be more ideal. And I don't know if the Steelers will provide that. Now, I do think out of the teams that might need a quarterback, the Steelers have an argument to have the best receivers. I mean, they obviously traded for DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens. Not only are those two talented receivers, but they're both pretty QB friendly, big guys that you can throw the ball up to and they can make plays. And obviously, DK Metcalf's a great deep threat, and Jaylen Milroe loves to throw the deep ball, so that'd be pretty fun to watch in Pittsburgh. But I think that's definitely an interesting fit. Another team that I think is kind of flying under the radar for Jaylen is New Orleans. The Saints obviously have a pretty crowded quarterback room right now, right? They have Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Haener behind Carr, who are both young guys who have played games in New Orleans and have shown some promise, but haven't really proven themselves at this point in their career. And I think if you throw Milroe in there, that would be super fun to watch. I mean, I think the main reason that New Orleans would make sense for Milroe is because they just hired Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator of the Eagles last year. He obviously helped lead the Eagles offense to a Super Bowl championship. One of the best rushing seasons out of a running back, Saquon Barkley, over 2,000 yards, and was in serious contention for the MVP. But I think the thing that would be really interesting about that is last year, the one thing I picked up on watching the Eagles every week is that Jalen Hurts protected the football better than almost every quarterback in the league. I believe there was a stretch in the middle of the season where he only had like one turnover-worthy play charted by PFF over the span of like 8 weeks, which was phenomenal for Jalen because he started the year with like 5 in 2 games. So if you give Milroe an offensive mind like Kellen Moore, who might want to run the football more and might help him learn how to protect the football more, that would be very beneficial for him. Tony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and let's not forget that Jalen's 2 games in the state of Louisiana weren't too bad. He will be going up against LSU's defense, but man, he could go from villain to hero for that crowd if he was able to have that kind of success with the Saints. I'd like to see Jalen stay in the South, and maybe we could, at New Orleans, it wouldn't be too far away to go see him play. And that I've always kind of liked the Saints a little bit, so that'd be fun. I think you make some good points there. I think really for whoever drafts Jalen, I think it's going to be a developmental project. So if, he was going to be thrown into the fire, too early at Pittsburgh, then that's obviously not a good fit. I think if they got him, even with their quarterback room the way it is, I think that they'd probably find a way to have a veteran start over him. I just don't think Jalen's ready yet to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level, but it's hard to argue with that potential. And if you can get a Lamar Jackson type guy, if he ever reaches that ceiling as a passer, I think obviously Jaylen Milroe could be MVP worthy. So he's just got such a great. He's got athletically, he has a few tools that are just really good. Now he needs to improve the accuracy, and he needs to see the field better. I think some of that can be fixed, right? I mean, you can kind of teach that, and it depends on the right system he gets in. You mentioned Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore did a good job with Jalen Hurts, and I don't think that Jalen Hurts and Jaylen Milroe are exactly the same quarterback. I know they get compared now. I think that's a little bit lazy just because they're running quarterback, or they can run, and they're from Alabama. But that being said, I mean, Kellen Moore knows how to work an offense with a running quarterback, and so I think that might be an interesting fit there. Now that you bring that up, but we'll just have to see. He's the person I'm probably the most interested in because, I mean, shoot, you never know.
Yeah.
And look, we didn't. It's not the same comparison, but like I didn't expect Michael Penix Jr. to be a top 10 pick last year. The Falcons reached on him. I didn't expect Bo Nix to be a top 20 pick last year, and the Broncos, reached on him. So teams say that they might, people say that, he might not go in the first round, but who knows? And one of those teams, whether it's the Giants or the Browns, who's to say that they don't give a little bit up and move back into the first instead of trying to wait, on day two. Maybe they're a little bit afraid and they just want to, swoop Jaylen up at, maybe make a trade with one of the teams in the late 20s just to make sure that they get their guy at quarterback. So that could see him get into the first round that way. So it'll be fun to watch for sure. I still don't think he's going to be a first rounder, but I wouldn't completely rule it out either.
Yeah, you mentioned the Giants and the Browns. I think the Giants would be a very interesting fit for him. My roommate is a Giants fan, and let's just say he was very happy when they finally cut ties with Daniel Jones last year. So bringing in Milroe would definitely be kind of a shock, as my roommate.
What a difference in quarterbacks, right?
Yeah,
Like complete opposite styles of quarterbacks.
Yeah, New York obviously brought in 2 veterans this offseason, and Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, kind of those guys that could be bridge quarterbacks, which would honestly be perfect for a guy like Milroe. He doesn't have to play right away. He has 2 veterans who will probably love to help him learn the ins and outs of the NFL and what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, as those are both 2 guys that have played NFL football for over 10 years. Plus, they have like a good young receiver there in Malik Neighbors, one of the top young receivers in the league. That would be electric. Milroe and Neighbors, Bama to LSU connection. They have the 3rd pick, so they're probably looking at Abdul Carter or the 2nd. It's the 2nd pick, right?
They have the 3rd pick, yeah.
Oh, 3rd pick, yeah. 3rd pick, so probably
Abdul Carter, yeah.
Probably Abdul Carter at 3, but in the 2nd round, maybe that could be the next Brian Dable developmental QB. That's another Alabama connection.
Sure, I like it.
Yeah. Do you have any other parting thoughts on Milroe? Any other teams you'd like to point out?
No, I think we hit almost like half the teams in the NFL. So watch, it'll be none of those teams. He'll go to some random team. So that'll be funny.
Yeah, the Eagles are going to draft their next Jalen quarterback, and he's going to eventually replace Jalen Hurts. That's what's going to happen. But shifting gears a little bit, let's go over to the spring transfer portal. It's been less busy of a portal than I think maybe people expected. But Tony, what have you been hearing? Alabama's targeting a tight end maybe to kind of fill out that depth. What have you been hearing on that front?
Yeah, they are titling a tight end. It's Brody Dalton. He's he's an inline tight end from Troy. He's supposed to be visiting Alabama as we speak. So, on Tuesday, we'll see how that visit goes. I think it sounds like it's going to be pretty straightforward. I know that North Carolina is in it as well for him, and he's a guy that grew up an Alabama fan, but you never know if somebody's going to throw more NIL money at him. I think, I don't think Alabama is going to invest a ton in what's going to just be a backup tight end. But Brody Dalton is a guy that he doesn't put up flashy numbers or anything, but I think he can do what Alabama needs him to do. He was a decent blocker last year, but the thing about him is he's got some reliable hands. I think he caught 15 of the 18 targets last season with no drops. Just the 3 incompletions were not catchable balls. I think he's a guy that, could maybe be a good outlet option for a young quarterback, whether it's Ty, whether it's Keelan, whether it's Austin Mack, one of those guys. I think he can be just that guy that can come in and do some of the stuff that CJ Dupree did. I don't know if he's going to be a starter. You still got Danny Lewis Jr. and you still got Josh Cuevas. The thing about it is, Danny Lewis Jr. was hurt this spring, didn't participate in the spring. Cuevas is more of a sorry about that. Cuevas is more of a an H-back role, and so you need some more depth at the inline position. We saw what happened this spring when teams when Alabama was down to one scholarship tight end and Justin Lindsay. So it's nice to bring in a veteran guy that they can get the job done. It's not going to be a huge flashy addition if they get him, but I think that he's an interesting one to look at. I think Alabama's probably going to go after a tackle as well. I think they need that depth there, but I don't necessarily think they're going to try to hit it out of the park in that regard. I don't think they want to spend crazy money on somebody that could be a backup. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Some of the price for some of these tackles, Henry, from what I'm hearing, is in the $900 to maybe $1 million range, and that's for guys that aren't necessarily going to come in and be automatic starters. So what happens? I don't necessarily know the numbers and what Alabama is doing, but what happens if you bring in a guy at 800, 900,000? You better make sure that you're paying Wilkin Formby that, or else you're gonna, he's gonna start to have some questions. And so I think that it might hurt the dynamic to do that. One of the things that Alabama, I guess you could look at is I think that they were encouraged by Olis Alanen. I don't necessarily know if he is the answer as the backup tackle, but he had a decent spring. He struggled a little bit at first, but he kind of found his footing. I think if Alabama just didn't do anything, that would be a position where maybe they feel a little bit more confident in Olas. Right now, there's just not a lot going on in the portal for Alabama. So I still think that there might be a tackle in there somewhere, get some experience on the offensive line. One thing I've heard that I don't think they will do is I'm not sure they're going to bring in a punter. I think that, bringing in the preferred walk-on Blake Dowd, I know there's been some reports and, we reported on it that he didn't have a great scrimmage and, he was kind of spotty throughout spring camp. I think, people close to the program are still pretty confident that he can get the job done. And then Alex Asparuhoff is coming back as well. I don't think they're going to mess with it and get another punter. From what I've heard, as of, we're, publishing this on Tuesday, or recording this on Tuesday, publishing it on Wednesday. Watch, I say that and they'll go sign a punter right today, but I don't think they'll do that. So, I think Alabama is looking to be very opportunistic in this portal. There's not necessarily a glaring need. I think you'd look at the tackle position, but it still has to make sense. You can't just bring in a backup for all this money if you don't think he's going to play. So I think that's where they're kind of sitting right now. It's not super exciting, but you never know what's going to happen. You never know, how it's all going to shake out. I think the biggest thing too, Henry, is retention. I mean, you haven't seen any notable Alabama guys leave this spring portal. And if Alabama can make it out of the portal with virtually the same team it entered in, I think they'd almost take that, because they didn't have a lot of glaring needs. And so not losing some of these guys that you didn't want to lose, I think is pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a great point. We know how easy it is for players to be swayed away from programs in this day and age of, NIL and the transfer portal. So to keep your entire roster of the spring going into the fall would be an absolute massive win for Alabama. I think Brody Dolan's definitely an interesting name to keep an eye on. That's another tight end Alabama's battling with North Carolina for, I guess. Marshall Pritchett, the freshman, that was an original flip from North Carolina. Now they're battling it out with Bill Belichick. So must be something there, but they definitely need more bodies in the tight end room just because of all the injuries, I mean, who knows? Brody Dolan could be a guy that they bring in and then he can become a contributor this fall just because the opportunities are there and the snaps might be there in practice because there's not guys healthy right now. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
One thing to point out too is he's a freshman, so it's not going to help you with the experience standpoint, but you are bringing in Caleb Edwards over the summer. He's going to be a fall enrollee or a summer enrollee, sorry. And so, I mean, you are going to get at least another body, and none of these injuries that occurred over the spring are thought to. I'm not too sure about Marshall Pritchett, but I think the injuries are, from what I can tell, they're going to be fine by the fall. So they'll have a lot more depth in the offensive line room. I think if they bring in Brody Dalton, they're probably bringing him in to be a little bit of a difference maker, not like some big star, but I don't think he's going to be just a warm body. I think that they have a little bit of a plan for him. And, you know, maybe like we didn't get to see, you know, Danny Lewis Jr., you know, like maybe he's the starting inline tight end. Maybe Alabama really likes him, you know, and because we like, I think we're just assuming right now that it's Danny Lewis Jr., but we didn't see him in the spring. And honestly, he hasn't done much during his time at Alabama. So if Alabama brings in a guy like Brody Dalton that they kind of like, you can't rule him out for that starting inline spot. So that you know, that would be that'd be big. I'm sure that's probably something that they're selling him on, is the opportunity to possibly start. One thing about Brody Dalton, though, is he grew up an Alabama fan. So I think that Alabama has that going for them. You know, I can't imagine in his situation that, you know, NIL is going to be that outrageous. You know, I know the market's crazy, but I don't know if it's as crazy for, you know, mid-tier inline tight ends. I don't think it's a market that's just totally booming. So I don't know if the numbers are going to be that big. And I think, you know, if you have a program that you've grown up following, I think that might be the deciding factor there. So we'll have to see. But yeah, not to just dampen water on the excitement on the transfer portal, but it's just not much there at the moment. You know, things can change, and you know, Alabama can get an opportunity and pursue it, but at the moment, there's not something. At least on the football side, I don't really see anything, you know, obvious there that's a needle mover to most fans.
Yeah, you did mention not on the football side, but Alabama basketball did have a pretty transfer portal window, pretty busy transfer portal window. Obviously, you know, they lost a lot of scholarship players and veterans from last season, last 2 seasons, honestly. A lot, long story short, a lot of Alabama's basketball roster has been flipped on its head. They still have 3 open scholarship spots, and the window is it's the spring window is officially closed. Tony, what have you been hearing on that front? And you wrote an article about who they might be targeting, so maybe shed some light on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap, you know, what Alabama is losing, it's a lot. I mean, you've got your entire starting 5 from the end of the season. So you've got Mark Sears, Chris Youngblood, Grant Nelson, Cliff Amore, LeBaron Philon's out for the draft. Then you're losing a big-time role player, probably your 6th man of the year, maybe, in Mo Diabate. You're also losing Jaron Stevenson and Darian Reed, Nas Cunningham. All, you know, lose those guys to the portal. Sears, Nelson, Amore, and Youngblood are all out of eligibility. So, I mean, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know, 9 players off the bat. You do bring in 3. They've already brought in 3 scholarship transfers in Miami guard Jaleel Bethea, who was a former 5-star guy. You've got Florida State forward Taylor Bowen. I really like him. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to be maybe even a better version of what they thought Grant Nelson was going to be. And so I'm pretty high on him. And then Noah Williamson is the Bucknell center, who I think he was the Patriot League Player of the Year. He's going to be a backup to Aiden Sherrill, who's coming back. But to get a Player of the Year from any conference to be a backup, I think is really big. So 3 good additions, and you're also bringing in a 3. It's so weird, Henry. I went to school way before you did, but when I was going to school, if they got one Rivals 100 guy as a recruit, that guy would be an ultimate star. And you're not hearing anything about Amari Allen, Davian Hanna, or London Jamison. That was the signing class of Alabama this year, and all 3 of those guys are Rivals 100 forwards. And so they did bring in a pretty exciting recruiting class to go along with those transfers. I'm not sure how much any of those 3 guys will play year one. But they're still talented as well. So you're sitting there at 10. The transfer portal, as you're listening to us right now, is closed. But of course, Alabama can make additions through people already in the portal. There are several people in the portal. And so with all that said, a little bit of a look at some of the players Alabama is targeting. The 3 people I mentioned were Rylan Griffin. Obviously, no introduction needed there. A key member of the Final Four team 2 years ago. Went to Kansas, had a down year at Kansas that didn't really work out for him. I think a move back to Alabama would be really beneficial for him. We saw him cancel his Kentucky visit. I think that's probably a good sign for Alabama. I feel good at the moment for Rylan Griffin, but he is a guy that has an agent, and it's difficult in the transfer portal, and sometimes things get complicated, and the NIL clouds thing. So I don't want to totally write, Rylan Griffin as a a return to Alabama just yet, but I think that that's a strong possibility, and I think he could probably come in and slot in as one of those. He's a 6'6" guy. That's what Alabama's looking for at the guard position. He can defend. He didn't really shoot as well from the 3-point line last season as he did, 2 years ago, but I think he can get back to that 2 years ago. Alabama, obviously, and Nate Oates, of course, knows how to use him in his system. So I like Rylan Griffin coming back. I think the biggest target here for Alabama in the transfer portal is Cedric Coward. He's a Washington State guard that only played in 6 games last season. Before getting hurt, he had a shoulder injury. Alabama's really, I think their biggest battle with Coward is the NBA draft. I think, he's a guy that could definitely go to the draft. In his 6 games last season, he averaged 17.7 points, shot 55.7 from the floor, 40%, 12 of 30 from beyond the arc. He's a 6'6" combo guard that can, I think, from talking to some people, maybe he could even be Alabama's point guard per se. I don't think they're going to have a true, they might not always use what you would call a true point guard, but he's a guy that can handle the ball. I know it's a small sample size, but in his 6 games last season, he averaged 3.7 assists. And he also, averaged 1.7 blocks. So he's a guy that plays some defense as well. I think, if they could get him, would transform Alabama to a legit contender. I think they still need somebody to kind of push them over the line there. I think they have a solid team coming back, but I think getting a guy like Coward would be really big. And the third guy I mentioned is actually not in the transfer portal. I guess you wouldn't say he's in the transfer portal. UConn commit, our signee, Darius Adams, decommitted from UConn and was granted a release from his letter of intent. So he's back. He's available. He is a 5-star McDonald's All-American. He's a shooting guard. He was the number 15 overall player in this class. He's a guy that Alabama was, considering it. They were in the running. He ultimately chose UConn over, I think, Michigan State and Tennessee, but Alabama was in the mix. And now that LeBaron Philon is moving on to the next level, I think you could see a Darius Adams be a legit target. I've heard that, Alabama's probably viewed as, if not the favorite, one of the favorites for him. So, really, I like Alabama's chances with all 3 of those guys. And that could be how they, fill those 3 spots. And if they do, I think you're talking about another top 10, top 5 roster. Because I think those would all 3 be, key contributors to next year's team. And you're talking about, probably 2 starters and a freshman off the bench that has the potential to kind of do what LeBaron Philon did.
Yeah, I guess I'll start from the bottom there. I feel like Darius Adams would be an absolute home run for Alabama's coaching staff and Alabama as a whole. I feel like as great as LeBaron Philon was, I think the one thing everybody says with him is he wasn't consistent enough for a shooter to really take that next step. And that's kind of why his NBA draft shot kind of stayed the same. That's why he's probably going to be a second-ish, maybe at a ceiling, late first type of guy, just because he wasn't able to develop his deep shot over the course of the year to the rate that everybody would have liked to seen from him. And Darius Adams is a guy that can score at all 3 levels. On the AAU circuit, he had multiple games scoring over 4 3-pointers, I believe it was, I saw in the article. And that would be perfect for Alabama, just to have another consistent scorer. I mean, obviously you're losing Mark Sears, you're losing a lot of your top contributors. So adding a young guy like that let's just say he comes to Alabama and has a great year. He'll probably be gone, but that's the type of guy that could really take you over the top, if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think he, like I said, I don't know if I'd call him a starter, but, for a long time, LeBaron Philon wasn't a starter. So, I think he definitely want a guy that can shoot off the bench. Also, he's 6'5", so you're adding another, they're really hammering home the lengthy guard thing. They're going to have Latrell Wrightsell and Aiden Holloway still, but everybody else they're going to have plenty of length. And you got guys like Houston Millette as well. So, I think Nate Oates got tired of seeing his small guards getting stuffed at the rim, and now you're going to bring in some length at that position. I think you're bringing in tall guys and you're bringing in tall shooters as well, because you look at it, if Coward, I don't know if he's going to shoot 40%, but 12 of 30 is not necessarily, for 6 games, not a very small sample size. I mean, that's 5 3-point attempts a game. So he's a guy that, can shoot. Obviously, we've seen what Rylan Griffin can shoot. And then Darius Adams has probably one of the smoothest strokes in this year's, freshman class. So those are three guys that, can all shoot. Bethea didn't have great numbers at Miami, but he can shoot. You look Bull Bowen for a big guy. I think he shot in the mid 30s from three last year. So you're really starting to get some guys that, it's going to be tough to defend this Alabama team again if they can get all these players. And I think you're getting you're getting a lot of Nate Oates, fingerprints on these recruits that they really do. I think he's kind of found what he's looking for, and not just necessarily going for talent, but going for players that totally fit what he wants to do. And I think when you look at some of the guys that he's bringing in, maybe their numbers aren't necessarily, the sexiest. And maybe like you look and you're like, okay, how good are these players? But to me, they totally fit what Nate Oates needs and what some of the deficiencies they had last year. I think you're seeing him grow as a coach and kind of, making not just flashy moves, but also just moves that really fit what I think he's been there. He's been so close. He knows what he needs to get there. And I think he's adding the right pieces to get there.
Yeah. You mentioned Taylor Bull Bowen. He actually in conference play, I'm looking at Ken Palm right now. So correct me if I'm wrong, but in conference play, he shot 24 from 51 from deep, which is 47%, which I guess ranked number 1 in the ACC in 3-point shooting percentage, probably among big men, I'd say. That's what that means. Yeah, I think that's what that would mean.
The thing I'm scared about with Bull Bowen is the splits from 2 years ago during his freshman year to last year. And I said he shot in the mid 30s. He shot 41% from beyond the arc total, not over 29 games. But the year before that, he shot 21.2%. So I mean, like, that's a huge jump. I don't think he's going to shoot 44% or 47 or whatever you said he shot. But I mean, he doesn't need to. I mean, if he can shoot 33%, 34% as a guy that's 6'10", 195, that's a nightmare. And he can play. He's long. He can. He averaged 1.5 blocks a game last year, and he averaged 5.2 rebounds. So he can give you that presence. I really like him. I think he's a great fit for the big that, Nate Oates likes to have. Maybe he's more of a Jaren Stevenson than he's a little bit more athletic than a Grant Nelson, but he's definitely a guy that is going to be very useful for Alabama. And I think he's going to be, so far, he's my favorite transfer addition.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, one of the things we always talk about with Alabama basketball, whenever a player has a really good shooting game out of nowhere, it's like, oh, Nate Oates must have given him the green light, because I don't know how many articles I wrote like that this season, but I feel like there were at least like 3 or 4 different players where I wrote a really similar article, like where like all of them say kind of the same thing, like my coach told me to shoot as much as I like shoot every shot. So maybe confidence thing for Bull Bowen would make him shoot 47%. That would be absurd, but we'll see what happens, obviously.
One thing to point out, and that's a good thing you pointed that out, is, so he played 31 games this freshman year when he shot 21%. He only attempted 33 threes. And so you saw last year he attempted 70 threes, and you saw him, bump up his average. His shooting, his actual shots basically doubled, and so did his percentage. And so you're right. Maybe giving that guy more the green light, giving him more opportunities is going to lead to him shooting better. I think he's going to be closer to 41% than he's going to be to 21%. I'll tell you that. I just don't know if he's going to shoot 41 again. But I mean, shoot, if he shot 41 in the SEC with this team, I mean, you're talking about possible. He could end up being a player of the year candidate. That would be, I don't even know if Nate Oates is expecting him to hit 41% of his threes, but if he shoots anywhere close to that, I think Alabama's got a huge gem.
Yeah, overall, it's going to be a very interesting summer and fall to watch for Alabama basketball. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have gotten comfortable with this core that we've kind of had over the last 2 years. And, as much as it stunk that they couldn't get the job done just because, they were together for so long. It's kind of a new look, and it's going to be fun to see how this team meshes together and how this team progresses over time. And I mean, we don't know what this team might look come their first scrimmage in the fall. So it's definitely going to be something to monitor.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun things to watch. I think, I'm looking forward to it. I wouldn't get too scared either, Alabama fans. I think they've got things figured out. I know that there's those 3 spots, but Alabama is pretty close to putting this roster together. And I think all 3 of those names that I mentioned, I think they have a decent shot at all 3 of them. So, while it seems scary at the moment with the portal being closed and there still being so much work to do, I wouldn't be too scared if I was an Alabama fan right now.
Yeah. But overall, that kind of puts a bow on today's episode of Tide Pod. Appreciate you guys tuning in and listening or watching, and make sure to stay tuned to Tide Illustrated for all the updates. Obviously, it's a big week with the draft and the portal still churning, so we'll have all the updates on there. But appreciate you guys tuning in. Tony, any last words?
No, I think I'm good. Just it's going to be an exciting week with so much going on.
Yeah, like I said, guys, thanks for listening and have a nice day.